A friend of mine challenged me to make a custom bracket to mount a TV to a TV stand. He gave me all the dimensions, but required that I did it in Tinkercad. Could it be done? Let's find out on today's Filament Friday. This video is sponsored by Creality3dofficial.com by ComGrow. Filament Friday is also brought to you by the generous donations of my Patreon supporters. The first step was to open Tinkercad and then make the base. I'm just going to use a cube here, and I'm going to drop the ruler so I can get some accurate dimensions. So I'm going to make this thing to his dimensions, 140 millimeters by 140 millimeters. I'm also going to make this thing 6 millimeters thick, and then I'm going to cut off the bottom because I'm going to round it. In Tinkercad, there's a setting you can put a radius on the corners, but it radiuses top and bottom as well. So I got it to where I want it. You can see there's a little bit of a lift that I want to get rid of on the bottom. So for that, I'm just going to bring in a hole block. This takes away material, spread it across the whole thing, drop this down to 1 millimeter tall, group this together, and now I'll have a nice flat bottom on this thing, but rounded corners. Now it is offset from the bed by 1 millimeter, so I'm going to set the offset to 0 and drop this back down on the bed. Now I need to make the first set of mounting holes, so I'm going to shove this plate to the side, and I'm going to bring a round cylinder, but this is a hole cylinder. It takes away material. And I'm going to round the sides to the max 64 edges, so it's pretty smooth. And I'm going to make it 10 millimeters by 10 millimeters because that's his dimension, and I'll leave this tall because it's taking away material. Now here's a trick with the ruler. You notice it's offset from the ends, but I'm going to click on the 3 lines to make it midpoint. I want the ruler midpoint. So now you can see the center is 6 millimeters and 8 millimeters away from the 0 point of the ruler. So if I make those both 0, now this cylinder is truly right at the 0, 0 point. So now I can just come up here to the duplicate button, duplicate this thing, and I've got 2 of them. And I just need to offset it by his 119 millimeters. Boom, now I've got 2 of them perfectly in line, perfectly centered 119 millimeters, center to center like you wanted. Now I'm going to group these 2 together, and I'm going to make a duplicate of these 2 because I need 4 holes. Now I'm going to set the offset on the side here to 116. So now I've got 4 equal holes perfectly placed center to center the way he wanted them. Now I'll group these together, and now my holes are set. So I can just shove this aside, and let's work on the next set of holes. Now this next set is actually a standoff and a hole, so I'm going to bring in a solid cylinder around the sides and make this to match his dimensions. Again, this one is 10 millimeters by 10 millimeters, but then he wants a hole in the center of this. So I'm going to make it 15 millimeters tall because that matches his dimensions as well. And now I'll bring in a hole cylinder and make this 5 millimeters by 5 millimeters and leave it tall so it'll go all the way through this thing. So I'm going to center him. I'm going to use a center tool or a line tool, really. Click on the cylinder, and then the 2 X and Y buttons puts it perfectly in the center. Now I actually need to drop this hole down a little bit so it'll cut through the base plate as well. And now I have my first post. So now I just need to set this to 0, 0 on the ruler. So I'll grab both of them, and I'm still at the midpoint setting. So now I can change the settings to 0 and 0. And now this thing is perfectly centered at the ruler. So now I can do the same trick. I can duplicate, because I've grabbed them both, and move this over 100 millimeters, which matches his dimensions. Now this gets a little tricky because I've got 2 elements here, so I've actually got to group these together, but it's going to put the holes in the mounts. We'll fix that later. So I'm going to do the same thing as duplicate these, offset them by 100, so now they're perfectly positioned where he wants them. So now I can group those together, and I've got my second set of mounts and holes. Now I want to group all these together and center to themselves. So I'll grab them all, and then I'll use the align tool, and I'll align them in both the X and Y direction so everything is now centered around the base plate. But the mounting holes are actually not going through the base plate. So I actually have to ungroup these mounts so the holes appear again, and then regroup this thing so those holes will actually go through the base plate. So once I've done that, I group it all together, and I've got a completed base exactly to the dimensions that he wanted. The first prototype printed fine. I did use some glue stick to make sure it stayed flat, so that's got to be cleaned off. But the outer screws went through the holes perfectly. It mounted to the TV, spot on, and then those bolts went perfectly into his mounting brackets. So he now has a TV mounted to his stand with a 3D printed bracket designed in Tinkercad. There you go. It can be done. Now, I know a lot of people will say, oh, you should have used Fusion 360, you should have used some other CAD, but I just wanted to show that Tinkercad can actually do accurate designs, and it's really not that hard with a few tricks. So if you're a Tinkercad user or you think Tinkercad can't do an accurate design, hopefully I showed you how to do it. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. If you're looking to get started with 3D printing and don't have a big budget, consider the Ender 3 Neo. Creality3dofficial.com by ComGrow is an official reseller of the Ender 3 and all Creality products. The Ender 3 Neo is $219, but if you look closely, they have a discount code. And when I ran the discount code in my shopping cart, it saved me $54. So it's a big savings and puts you well under $200. So if you're looking at getting an Ender 3 Neo, check out Creality3dofficial.com by ComGrow. If you like what I'm doing here, maybe check out some of the other videos popping up. You want to help support the channel, Patreon is one way, or support me on things.com. And if nothing else, click on that Filament Friday logo and subscribe. I'll see you next time right here at Filament Friday.